Witch of the Holy Night, I think. Yeah, alright. It was a winter's day 8 years ago. I'm just not gonna. Hold up. Holy shit. I'm just gonna turn it off. I'm gonna risk it. Like, I can't hear myself, but whatever. It was a winter's day 8 years ago. That solo morning when she understood the value of life for the very first time. Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories, both frustrating and Helican? What the fuck? Nice words, holy shit. That was only during summer though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station, after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and iced over windows to clear. Mind starting up the car for me? Her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath, until she reached that old sedan. As always, she inserted the key and started the engine. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she'd done so many times before. Uh-oh. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts. Oh my god. A monstrous looking engine. And something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine compartments. The mother was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. Holy fuck. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather the chunks of meat that had been its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster. Poor things. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine, and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. It's okay, it wasn't your fault. Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten, trembling and possibly blind to continue to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. Wait! She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Putting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of the fairy tales. But so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help. I suppose you want me to alter this kitten's fate. The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. This kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wishes. Wish like a machine. girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its spirit was cold. The warmth of life had left his body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky.
トロだったな。結局元に戻すと。
We were too late. Some things cannot be undone. Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return.
そこに誰かいるの?
Is somebody there? That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. What? Indeed. Whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy, I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets, there's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Chapter 1, A Strange One. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was ashen, water-color gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. I mean, that's not bad. 43 isn't bad. I don't know what the fuck they're saying. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. That's not bad. On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable. But today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination. But having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. She's just like me. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shut the curtains, then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
I'd like a nice, uneventful dream for 2 hours, thank you. Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, her eyes popped open out of habit.
こんな日に限って。
Oh, come on. Why today of all days? The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Entering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
アリス出ないの？
Why doesn't Alice answer it? She thought her housemate would get it, but soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school, was most likely in class at her prestigious little hilltop academy. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ring seem even louder.
もうせっかくの安眠を。
I'm trying to sleep here. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room.
うわ、寒。
God, it's cold. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than in a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion set in the mountains was surrounded by a dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to the nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishing had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、幽霊屋敷そのものだけど。
Well, it is a haunted house, I suppose.
だいたい2人で住むには広すぎるのよ。
It's too large for just the two of us. She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale, whether it be objectively true or merely supposition. It is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared by early afternoon.
と言っても、私には関係のない話だけど。
Not that it has anything to do with me, though. The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. She didn't encounter any other students along the way, nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk to the facility room simply read "Facility closed." Faculty. School had given all of its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim frame glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. Holy shit. The mild-mannered image this mid-20s man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Yamashiro-sensei.
Mr. Yamashiro. She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
Yeah, ohayo, Aozaki-kun.
Hey there.
要件は聞いているかな?
Good morning, Miss Azaki. Guess that this means you got the call.
はい。1時間前に自宅で、事前に何の相談もなく。
Yes, they called me at home about an hour ago, out of the blue. Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro is not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere? Oh, fucking no. Like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure. Not a buddy to joke and pal around with. It was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural for her that her manners towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk.
今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
You're gonna follow me today.
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではありませんから。
You must be imagining it. I'm like this every day. The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial.
そうならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
If you say so, just go easy on our guest today, okay? To be honest, we're not completely sure how to deal with him yet.
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
About that, do you want to tell me what the hell is going on? Because I have no clue. As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone, and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの?
Let's start at the beginning. What did they tell you over the phone?
転入生の紹介をするとだけです。 理由も脈絡もない説明でした。
Just that I'd be introduced to a transfer student. They were a little hazy on the rest, though. One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed by the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか。
If this was all a joke to you, perhaps I should just go home.
いや、ごめん謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。ちょっと君の手を借りたくてね。
Wait, I didn't mean to laugh. This is not a practical joke. You could really use your help.
本当に転入生の問題で。
So there really is a transfer student?
うん、訳ありというか難しいというか。
Yes, but how should I put it? Difficult circumstances.
彼、宗十郎くんと言うんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
His name is Shojoru, and he's a bit, well, peculiar. So we thought someone around the same age would be best suited to show him the ropes. She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had a behavioral problem or was difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
You know your teacher calls someone that every day. She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that her conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
I have a question.
何？あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ？
Yes. He's a second year student just like you. He's well behaved and a good listener. He's not the most energetic individual, but that just means he'll be easier to get along with, right?
青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
He's not in the same homeroom class as you, but I'm sure you'll get along just.
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。
I'll be the judge of that when I actually meet him.
そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
None of that answered my question. Why me? Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her, to a point. At times, that strength shattered expectations, and on those occasions, they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That's how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her as over the past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。
I'll ask you one more time, Mr. Yamashiro.
それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Why does it have to be me? Pressured by a question with a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
うん、それはね。
Well, about that.
別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
You're probably thinking it's because you're the iron-fisted ruler of the student council and are willing to strike down both teacher and student for the good of the school. But you do it wrong.
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
I can't imagine any other reason you'd call me. Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let a genuine smile. Let slip a genuine smile, admiring that miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。
I mean, I'd handle this myself if it was just about pure obligation. But who gets this job has nothing to do with whether they're a teacher or the student council.
なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
I just felt that you were the only one who would entertain this kind of request without needing to weigh all sides. That's why I insisted it be you. In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
Mr. Yamashiro.
うわ、怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。
Oh dear, would you stop glaring at me like that already? At least put on a smile for your new schoolmate.
とまあ、納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もう随分待たせてしまっているからね。
If you're agreeing to help, we should go see him. We've already kept him waiting long enough as it is.
それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
And because you braved the rain to get here, I'd be happy to give you a ride home. Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied before turning and walking out of the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain showered light into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved students might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. It was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he had never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him, it was a drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it barely. Its smell and sounds were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. The trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked the rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked out the scent of the soil and reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feelings that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having its passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing and cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out in this moment. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on the way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
なんて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
What a miserable level of isolation. How is it even possible in post-war Japan? He's like Robinson Crusoe. She had every right to be angry. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villages in the full of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways in Japan Rail, the old national railways now, spanned the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
When you say no electricity, you mean in general, right? Like he must have had access to a public phone.
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし。
Apparently not. He mentioned how shocked he was by the phones when he started living here.
電話って便利ですね。なんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
I kid you not, he said. Wow, telephones are so useful. Couldn't really deny that, could I? She shot him a sidelong glare his way as he left. It seemed that the naivety of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど。
They probably didn't have police officers either. My family home is up in the mountains, so it's not inconceivable they wouldn't have electricity.
そいつ学校も知らないんですか？
But he doesn't even know what school is?
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど、実際来るのは今日が初めてらしい。それで緊張していたのかな。あまり会話も弾まなかった。
Nope. He's heard of them, but this is apparently his first time visiting one. Maybe that's why he's nervous. He wasn't very talkative.
ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや、探検隊の話だね。
He's almost, what would you call it? Feral? Like a boy raised by wolves. I suppose that makes this a safari.
怖いな、青崎くん。冗談だって。そう睨まないでくれ。
Hey, you're scaring me, Ozaki. I was joking. Go easy, okay?
大丈夫。話してみた感じ、おとなしい子だったから。なんていうか、言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
And don't worry, I got the feeling from talking to him that he's a nice kid, but he was almost like, I don't know, a cute little animal that doesn't speak human.
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
Your jokes and metaphors aren't helping. As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teacher had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallways, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん、
Azuki?
君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
I believe in you and all, but I'll say it again. Be nice, okay? Can you at least try to smile?
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
I'm bad at faking smiles, but I'll do my best.
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。
Really? That's a relief.
いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
I really mean it. It's good to know you're not good at everything. Mr. Yamashita's soldiers slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ。愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。
I already know I'm not the friendliest looking person in the world, but I can't just make myself smile at the drop of a hat.
だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
You should have asked Tobimaru if that's what you were after. She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all of this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。
I hate him already. He's my sworn enemy, and I haven't even met him. Sorry, but I couldn't care less about his extenuating circumstances. I don't fucking know.
間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
You think this isn't awkward for me too? Honestly, why did this have to happen when I'm so busy? As she was slipping in, her pounding headache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy was on the other side of the door, maybe anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashita opened the door into the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with the most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective, turning back the clock just a little. You don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でもそろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろう。
It must be 9 o'clock already. Yeah, that seems about right. He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
よかった。忘れられているかと思った。
Finally, I thought they had forgotten about me. You could hear the two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。随分とお待たせしちゃって。
So sorry to keep you waiting. The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought me here.
ってあれ里中先生いないんですか？ひどいなあ。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Hey, where's Mr. Sato Naka? I told him to keep you company. He shouldn't have left you here. Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sujuru gulped. The sound of the rain in the windows faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This is how it felt when time stood still. Oh my god, it's rain. Oh my god. She blinked quickly a few times as if taken back. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes widened slightly, as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feeling into words was a different matter altogether, as we will never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くん。
Let me introduce the two of you. This is the transfer student I mentioned, Sujuru Suzuki.
で、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。
This is the girl that will be showing you around.
うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
She's our student council president and came in on our day off just to welcome you. Her name is Aoko Ozaki. Shit. His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks.